Okay, so let's unpack what's been really setting social media alight recently. We've got the usual kind of celebrity news swirl, but this time it's really focused on Peggy Ovire and Frederick Leonard.
Right, the Nollywood power couple. Their marriage seemed, well, picture perfect from the outside.
Exactly, but it looks like they've unexpectedly hit some rough waters. And it all sort of culminated in this very, very candid Instagram live session from Peggy.
Yeah, I saw that. And for anyone following them, you might have noticed the usual signs, the joint appearances, the frequent social media posts. They definitely slowed down.
It really had. And like clockwork, the speculation started.
Oh, absolutely. Infidelity, just general unhappiness. Those were the main theories floating around. The usual suspects when things go quiet.
The rumor mill was definitely in overdrive. But Peggy's Instagram Live, it really changed the conversation, didn't it?
It absolutely did.
Yeah.
She promised she'd be unfiltered, give the real story.
And what she revealed seems to go way beyond just the standard gossip. So that's our deep dive today. We're looking into that live stream.
Yeah, what was the core message? What's the truth behind all those assumptions?
And maybe what does this tell us about, the pressure cooker of celebrity life and relationships under that kind of spotlight?
Well, it's fascinating how she started. Peggy mentioned, being hesitant to air her private life publicly, which is totally understandable.
Of course. Who would want to?
But she felt her silence was actually becoming louder than the truth. It was letting those wrong interpretations fester.
That makes sense. So she confirmed there are marital problems.
Yes, she confirmed they're facing challenges. But crucially, she immediately shut down the infidelity rumors. So that wasn't the main issue.
Okay, so not infidelity, then what? Because this is where it gets really interesting, I think.
Right. She didn't point fingers outward.
Oh.
Instead, Peggy identified the core issue as feeling, and this is a direct quote, emotionally starved in a room full of people.
Wow. Emotionally starved. That's a powerful phrase. What does that even mean in a marriage context? It's not about being physically alone, clearly.
Exactly. It's not about physical distance. When she says emotionally starved, she's touching on something deeper. Psychologists might call it emotional neglect.
Emotional neglect.
Yeah, and it doesn't necessarily mean the partner's being intentionally cruel. It's more a persistent pattern, feeling to really connect with or respond to the other person's emotional needs.
So feeling unheard, unseen, even when you're right there together.
Precisely. That lack of deep connection, not getting the intimacy or understanding you need, it leads to feeling invalidated, lonely.
Yeah.
Even within the marriage itself.
And Peggy really illustrated this, didn't she? With that contrast between the public image and her private reality.
She did. That quote was incredibly stark. You post a photo, people say goals, but behind the scenes, you're crying into your pillow at 3 a.m.
Oof. That just hits hard. It really highlights that massive disconnect we sometimes see. The curated perfection online versus the messy reality behind closed doors.
Absolutely. It makes you question so much of what we consume online, doesn't it? These highlight reels.
Totally. Are we setting ourselves up with unrealistic expectations for our own relationships based on these goals?
Yes, it's a valid question. And apparently, that statement really resonated. Peggy mentioned getting a flood of DMs, mostly from women, saying they felt the exact same way.
Wow. So it struck a chord.
Definitely.
Yeah.
It underscores a struggle that's maybe amplified for celebrities, the constant pressure to be perfect, but it's clearly a feeling many people recognize.
Yeah, you don't need to be famous to feel that disconnect. Now, what I found particularly insightful was how she talked about Frederick. She didn't just tear him down. She wasn't demonizing him at all.
No, she made a point of acknowledging his good qualities, his talent, his charisma. She even mentioned his efforts earlier in the relationship.
Right. But then she delivered that line, the one about you can love someone and still be broken by them.
Yes. And you can admire someone and still be disappointed.
Yeah.
That was powerful.
So powerful. And then clarifying, Frederick is not a monster. He's human. But being human doesn't excuse emotional absence.
That distinction is everything, isn't it? It's so nuanced.
It really is. It avoids that easy, simplistic blame and points to a much more complex, messy human reality.
Exactly. It feels like a very mature way to look at it. She's saying, he has value, I see that, but I also need to hold him accountable for this emotional dynamic between us.
And that phrase, again, emotional absence, it just perfectly captures that feeling she described earlier, right? Being there physically, but not emotionally present.
Precisely. And she linked this directly to the pressures of being famous, didn't she?
She did. She said, we were so busy being perfect for fans, we forgot to be present for each other.
That's quite an admission.
And then, likes, hashtags, and followers don't make a marriage. Communication does. And we lost that somewhere along the way. That's a pretty damning indictment of that whole celebrity culture focus.
It really is. It raises a huge point about external validation versus internal connection. When all your energy goes into crafting that public image, chasing the likes,
Yeah.
well, it can starve the actual relationship.
Yeah.
You forget the essential work of nurturing the private bond because you're too busy performing perfection.
Performing perfection. That's a good way to put it. So, okay, given all this, where do they actually stand now? Did she make it clear?
It wasn't a clear-cut announcement like, we're divorcing.
No.
She specifically said, we're not divorced. But then she added, but we're not where we used to be. And maybe that's okay.
Huh. That's ambiguous, but maybe realistic?
I think so. Maybe intentionally ambiguous. It suggests they're in a transition period. They know things have shifted significantly.
And she mentioned next steps, like therapy.
Yes, she emphasized taking space for individual healing, prioritizing that, and also seeking therapy, both separately and potentially together.
Okay, so they're addressing it, not just ignoring it.
Seems like it.
Yeah.
It shows a commitment to working through the issues, even if the outcome for the relationship itself isn't, certain yet.
And the reaction online must have been huge.
Oh, immediate and massive. Hashtags like hashtag Peggy Speaks, hashtag Healing Not Divorce, hashtag Respect Peggy just blew up.
Wow.
And it wasn't just fans. Other Nollywood stars jumped in with support. Like Mercy Agby commented something like, this took courage.
Yeah, I saw that, and at Tatcha too.
Yes, Tasha said, more power to you. This is what women need to hear. Which really points to that sense of shared experience, maybe particularly among women in the public eye.
That solidarity is interesting, suggests others recognize those pressures she's talking about.
Absolutely. And the sheer volume of support just shows how much her openness resonated. It clearly touched on broader themes than just their specific marriage.
Yeah. Of course, you always get the critics, right? Was there backlash, people accusing her of doing it for attention?
There was definitely some of that. The usual airing dirty laundry for clout accusations. Some even speculated it was all a PR strategy for a breakup announcement.
How did Peggy respond to that?
She addressed it head on.
Yeah.
Said something very direct, like, this isn't about clout, it's about clarity.
Clarity, okay.
Yeah. I'm tired of fake headlines and twisted narratives. I'm finally speaking because silence was destroying me.
That's a powerful comeback. You can almost feel the frustration behind that, the need to own her own story.
Absolutely. It frames her speaking out not as a publicity stunt, but as an act of self-preservation almost.
And it sounds like she's trying to channel this whole difficult experience into something positive moving forward.
It seems that way. Her priorities now, she said, are her mental health, focusing on new projects, and reclaiming her personal power.
Good for her.
And she even just hinted, mind you, at maybe starting a podcast or some kind of platform.
Oh, interesting. For what?
For women dealing with similar stuff, marriage issues, fame, that kind of mental fatigue that comes with it all.
That would make a lot of sense, actually. Turning her experience into a resource.
It feels like a natural next step. And her final thought in the live stream really summed it up. There's so much pressure to perform, to pretend, but I choose peace over perfection now.
Peace over perfection. That's quite the mantra.
Isn't it? It signals a real shift in her values and focus.
Okay, so wrapping up this deep dive then. The big takeaway here isn't really about the infidelity gossip, is it?
No, not at all. Peggy's story, her emotional honesty, it really centered on that feeling of emotional neglect and how the intense pressures of fame maybe made that worse. It's a much more nuanced picture.
And maybe a more relatable one for many people, even outside of celebrity circles.
I think so. Her willingness to just be vulnerable, talk about the messy parts, clearly hit home. The huge public reaction kind of proves how brave people thought it was and how much it resonated.
Definitely brave. So it leaves us and you listening with something to think about, perhaps. In this world where so much of life, especially for public figures, happens online, how does that constant demand to project a perfect image affect our actual real-life relationships? Our own well-being?
Yeah, is that chase for the social media goals sometimes working against the authentic connection, the individual healing that we actually need? whether you're famous or not.
It's definitely something worth pondering long after this conversation ends.